Welcome to the Maternal Wealth Podcast, a space for all things related to maternal health, pregnancy, and beyond. I'm your host, Stephanie Terrio. I am a labor and delivery nurse and a mother to 3 beautiful boys. Each week, we dive into inspiring stories and expert insights to remind us of the power that you hold in childbirth and motherhood. We're here to explore the joys, the challenges, and the complexities of maternal health. Every mother's journey is unique and every story deserves to be told. Please note that this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to replace professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with your healthcare provider for medical guidance that is tailored to your specific needs. Are you ready? Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Maternal Wealth Podcast. Today, we have Katy Featherstone Coombs. She and I connected a couple weeks ago over Facebook. I was looking for some women to come and chat with us about their birth stories, and Katy was all about it. She reached out, we chatted, we connected, and she is here today to share her birth stories with us. Welcome, Katy.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. Let's start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and why you wanted to be on the show.
So I'm from Southampton in the UK. I'm 32 and I've got 2 kids. They are 6 and 3. So I've got a boy called Oswald who's 6 and a girl called Pandora who's 3. I am super passionate about birth and sort of being in control of your birth and feeling in control of your birth. I know that can look in lots of different ways, but just want women to feel really empowered by their birth. I think it's an amazing and fascinating thing that women go through.
One of the ways I really enjoy starting the podcast is talking about a love story. How did you meet your husband?
We actually met through Ultimate Frisbee, which I think is much bigger in America than it is here. So yeah, he had left uni, I think, and I was still at uni doing my teaching degree at the time. And I joined a local team so that I could play a bit more. And he happened to be at that local team. And yeah, we met there and kind of the rest is history. We still play Frisbee together. We've been together 10 years. I love the fact that we met through a hobby and that we've got like that shared passion and interest. He is much better than me, but I still love playing.
Is it an intense sport?
Yeah, super intense. What I love about it is that you don't know you're exercising though. Like it is really hard and you do get really out of breath and it is really intense. But because it's self-refereed here in the UK, the way you relate to one another and the way that you have to build relationships is really lovely. So it's a really kind sport. Generally, everyone's really like nice to each other and everyone works really hard and cheers each other on. But it's always a really safe space and a really nice place to be. Like we can take kids to the tournaments and it's just a really nice way to exercise without really like you're having fun at the same time. So it's really nice.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. And you're able to take the kids and they watch and they want to get into it.
They love like cheering us on. And like my son, if he doesn't come for like the day of a tournament, he wants like a lowdown of exactly what happened and who did what and who threw what. And yeah, he's very into it. That's
so cute. I love it. So you have 2 kids. When did you find out you were pregnant with your first?
Yeah, so we decided, we were away for my birthday and we decided we had a chat and we were like, okay, let's think about trying for a baby. So I was 24. Yeah, I was 24 and we had this conversation. It was the 6th of August and I was 25 on the 10th of August. We were having this conversation about it and we were like, let's start trying. And then we got pregnant like that night. So, which is obviously super exciting and we're really, really fortunate, but massively overwhelming. And I thought it took like a year or 2 to get pregnant. Yeah.
So it's interesting because I'm really into numbers and my children, I have 3 boys. Their birthday is August 6th, September 6th, and October 6th. And I just recently interviewed somebody and she was talking about September 6th. You're talking about August 6th. So I'm just like, wow. These numbers keep coming up. I feel like it's just meant to be that I'm chatting with you and chatting with these other women on this podcast. Just find it fascinating how these numbers keep repeating themselves.
Yeah, what a strange one. That's so cool. That's so cool.
So you found out you were pregnant. How was your first pregnancy?
Yeah, I think I was really fortunate, really. Found out I was pregnant when I was away. No, I just got back from the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which is a massive comedy festival in Edinburgh, in Scotland. And I didn't drink when I was there, and I knew I just didn't. Like, I just didn't feel like it. And then I got home and we found out I was pregnant, but we were going to Madrid, like, the next day or something. And I didn't know at the time, but Joss was going to ask me to marry him. So it was like this massive proposal holiday, and it was really exciting, and everyone had been in on this plan, but I had no idea, and I was so grumpy. Like, I was grumpy and I was hungry and I was fed up, and he was like, we need to go to this park, it's only open on a Sunday and it's only open at this time, and like all this about this park. And I was like, I can't walk, I don't want to go, I'm fed up, I'm hungry. Like, I was so miserable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, then he proposed to me, and obviously I felt guilty about being so grumpy. Generally, like, was very smooth sailing. I would say emotionally I struggled. Like, I definitely struggled with, at the same time that I was about 12 weeks, maybe a bit less, they do a thing in the UK, and I don't know if it's travelled to America, but it's called a wave of light, and everyone lights candles for those that have lost babies. And there's a lot of talk on social media about miscarriage. And so I was super anxious and I just remember saying to Joss the whole time, like, we can't celebrate, we can't be happy because we don't know that we're going to make it. Like, that being really, really challenging. But overall, like, physically, I loved being pregnant. Like, I loved feeling pregnant and being pregnant. I loved waddling around. I was gigantic. I couldn't drive, like, by the end. But I loved the feeling of having a little human inside of me.
For your delivery, were you planning to have a home birth? Did you want to go to a birth center, hospital, birth providers too? What were you thinking? What did you want?
So I don't know how much you know about how it works in the UK, but over here you generally just contact your midwife, and then, because it's all run by the NHS, so you generally just contact your midwife. It's not the only way. You can go via a private midwife, but generally people contact their midwife and then make decisions with them sort of by your side. But I don't know how I worked it out or what I saw or who I came into contact with, but someone suggested home birthing to me and hypnobirthing. It must have been at a very poignant time, because I went away and did loads of research into it and did a hypnobirthing course, which we got stuck in the snow for, and it was all a bit dramatic, but it was brilliant. And like, I loved it and learned so much, and was quite then passionate about having a home birth. I measured normal, typically, I don't know, in, you know, as normal as a normal person can be, I guess, whatever that means, during my pregnancy. So I was kind of allowed, given permission, which again, I don't really like that word. Like, I think you're in control. It's so easy to become a patient when you're pregnant, and I tried really hard to not be a patient. And I requested a home birth and sort of set things up for a home birth, and that's what we did. We were obviously spoken to about the risks associated with it, and I did go 9 days over. There was lots of conversations when we got to the later stages about it being more risky, but I was really passionate about it. And I also don't really not believe in due dates, but I don't really think they're something that we can go off of. They're not very like reliable as such.
I want to ask you, when you say you contact your midwives, did you already have a midwife for like GYN care, or you're finding someone new to you?
Yeah, so it's completely new to you. So basically, each doctor's surgery in your area has a midwife associated with the doctor's surgery, and then you just get given that midwife. And they only tend to do community care. So they are only responsible for your care during your pregnancy outside of the hospital. We don't have continuity of care generally, although there are more teams set up now that follow you all the way through and will try and follow you into hospital. But again, so I was a student midwife for a couple of years, and from my experience of that, the continuity of care midwives often aren't called in time and don't end up being there at the end.
Did you go into labor? Do they induce for a home birth?
So they don't induce, they don't really do anything because of the risks associated with inductions. They just kind of leave you to it. So I went into labour when I was getting my nails done. My contractions started, and I was in this massive shopping centre, and I was with my friend, and I was like, "Ooh, that's happening." And she was really pregnant too.
Oh yeah.
Her baby was born in June, so mine was born in May, so we were about 8 weeks between us. But we were walking around H&M, and I was like, "Just a minute," and then I'd carry on walking. I knew that potentially it could take some time. So I wasn't panicked and I was quite chill. Like I just drove home and said to Joss, and we got home and just like stuck New Girl on, which I love. And I laughed and laughed and ate loads of pasta because I knew I had to carb load and get my energy up when I could, and just, ate and chilled and cuddled on the sofa. And then when it got darker that evening and things were kind of ramping up a bit more, I got in and out of the bath and lots of relaxing music and things. And then so if you select to have a home birth here, you do meet the home birthing team of midwives before you go into labour, and they assign you, you meet one and they kind of assign them to you. So you stop using your community midwife and you start using the home birth one.
Mm-hmm.
Probably around 28, 30 weeks. And then, but any of the team could obviously come depending on who's working on that day. And I called about 7:00 that night, and they sent me a lady who was obviously very adamant I wasn't in labour, was older, was quite dismissive, and really smelt of cigarette smoke. And she came into our bubble, and that was really hard. I found that really challenging because I didn't want that smell. I didn't want that disruption in my like beautiful, calm bubble. But she didn't stay very long. I can't remember how long she stayed for. She didn't stay very long the first time, and then she came back because things ramped up a few hours later. So she came back a few hours later, and then she did stay until the shift change at 7:30 in the morning. And then so it all started at 10 a.m. on the 10th, and I gave birth at 3:48 on the 11th in the afternoon.
So she stayed with you in your home the whole night?
She stayed, probably from about 3 a.m. till 7 when the shift changed. And she stayed for about 4.5 hours in our home. Yeah, she was just in the kitchen, hanging out.
Okay, so at 7:00, then a new midwife came.
Yeah, and this one came with so 2 midwives came this time, because they generally send 2. If you're like imminently going to give birth, they send 2 midwives. So 2 came, but they also brought a student with them. So they had 3. So I had 3 midwives at home, and they were wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And they just hung out in the kitchen because I'd made them loads of cakes and food to keep them busy. We've got cats, so they just stroked the cats and hung out when I didn't need them.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, before we get to the birth, for those who are listening who don't really know about hypnobirthing and are curious, could you talk a little bit about how you used it while you were laboring?
Yeah, of course. I think it's fascinating, and it really requires the work to be put in before you go into labour. But during my labour, I used the power of my thought and my brain and music and my environment to make sure I was in a calm space, and I'd trained my body into that calm sort of emotional state. I'd relaxed my nervous system before I went into labour. So my body was, as soon as it heard the music, as soon as it heard the cues, it kind of automatically then relaxed. Also, what hypnobirthing taught me was to make decisions based on what I knew my body was telling me, and to listen to my body and to make my decisions along with the information that I was gaining from my environment and from the midwives and my research, to make sure that I felt empowered, and that Joss, my husband, was a huge advocate for me. Like, he knew what to say and what I wanted, and we really laid out what we wanted and how we felt about different things, and how to have a discussion should something come up that wasn't necessarily like planned. We knew how to have that conversation in a way that I felt supported. So I guess that's probably like how I used it. Lots and lots of breathing techniques. And I think lots of people just think that's what hypnobirthing is, but I think there's so much more to it. But the breathing techniques, the music were probably the really big things for me.
We paused this episode for a quick message from our sponsor. At Maternal Wealth, we aim to ensure that you have access to the best and the most appropriate care. That's why we created a maternal healthcare provider database. Maternal health providers can easily create profiles to promote their services and business, helping to increase access for those seeking their care. This is a one-of-a-kind database that offers a new and exciting way for women to search for and find maternal health providers near them and tailored to their specific needs. Profiles feature badges that highlight various services such as TOLAC-friendly practices, all-female practices,
LGBTQAI plus inclusivity, language options, access to vaginal breech services, and more. Did they check you at all to let you know you were fully dilated, or did you start to get the urge to push? How did that go for you?
Yeah, so they did check me, and I think because my labour had been quite long, they were probably checking me more often. Like he did the typical like come down, we can see him, then he went back up again. He did that quite a lot, but at the time we had no idea how big he was, so we just thought it was standard. But they did check me, and they have got waterproof. So I was in a birth pool at home now, so I'd got into the pool at home that I'd hired. So I was in a birth pool. They were checking me underwater, and they had a waterproof sonogram. So yeah, that was all fine. They were checking, and I remember them using a mirror and checking for his head, and they weren't really disrupting me or making me move in particular positions. They were really good at giving me my space and letting me sort of flow with what was going on with my body.
How about breaking your water? Did it break naturally?
So no, this is probably where we had to have one of those conversations, which we obviously hadn't really foreseen. My waters didn't break, and I thought that might be why things were taking so long, because my waters hadn't broken, so they did break them for me. And that did speed things up. I think I was about 7 centimetres when they broke my waters, and that obviously ramped things up because I was 7 centimetres already. Yeah, they did break them for me, and I was fine with that. Actually, I was really comfortable with it because I, made the decision based on the information at the time.
How long did you push for, like actively pushing?
Yeah, I can't remember, but I do remember it being longer than they would have liked, because they said to me, if you don't get him out, I got out of the pool in the end because I was pushing in the pool and he wasn't coming. So then they changed my position and got me out onto the sofa.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember them saying to me, if you don't get him out within the next 5 minutes, we're going to have to take you into hospital.
Okay.
And I think they said that because, so one of the midwives it was going to be wasn't another shift change, but I know one of the midwives was starting to get a bit more worried about how long it had taken, and they couldn't, because you get to a point where then becomes quite difficult to read the baby's heartbeat right because of the position they're in, and they started to feel a bit more conscious of that, I think. So they were saying to me, you really need to work hard and get him out now. And I did lots of down breathing and, did get him out within the next push. And then everybody realised why he took so long, because he was gigantic.
And when you say gigantic, how big was he?
He was 10 pound 8.
That's a healthy sized baby.
Yeah.
When he came out and they put him on you, were you like, this kid is heavy?
I remember thinking he's so slimy. And I also remember I dropped him because I have just seen it on telly, right? You watch birth on telly and the midwives put the babies on the mums and the babies just stay there. And so I didn't think, I was so tired, and I just didn't think about the fact that I'd have to hold him. So they put him on me and he just slipped down my tummy. And I was like, oh, and I remember catching him and being like, oh, I have to hold him. And he was so limmy, he was so limmy and big. He wasn't this tiny thing that you see. He took up the whole of my torso, laying on me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's amazing thinking back to how amazing they are when they first come out into the world. And he was very chill. He wasn't, particularly stressed about his entry to the world. He was quite calm, which was really nice. Yeah, and he seemed good and healthy.
So because he was a little big, did you have any complications with bleeding afterwards?
Yes. So I obviously birthed a placenta, which again is another thing that I didn't know I'd have to do, which seems mad, right? But they never show that bit on telly. People don't really talk about it, but I remember her being so now you need to birth a placenta. And I was like, sorry? It's just you need to push more. And I was like, no, I can't push anymore. I've been doing this for way too long. I'm tired. And she was like, okay, just stand up then, and we'll try and let gravity do its thing. And they gave me the injection to help speed it up. So, and I was okay with that. Again, that's a choice here. So I was okay with it. And it came out, and she tried to catch it. It fell on the floor and left this huge blood stain on my carpet. But it's just one of those things. It was all funny. And then And then I was bleeding a lot. So then they realised, like, you know, they tidied me, you know, they were having a look and checking it up and tidying everything up and cleaning everything up. And then they realised that they couldn't really do what they needed to do at home because we were at home. But they weren't like massively panicked, but I probably lost about 1.5 litres of blood. So not heaps, but like enough to make them think, you know, I was losing blood. We should probably go to hospital so that we can get this sorted out and stitched up. I think it was a 3rd degree tear. It was okay. We went to hospital, and then my experience at hospital was not so positive, unfortunately. Before I went to surgery, it was really, really awful and quite traumatic. But after that, they were very kind to me.
How did you get to the hospital? Did they call an ambulance or did you go in your car?
Yeah, so they had an ambulance there, like waiting for me outside. And I remember because the ambulance people came in and they also had a student with them. So they had 2 paramedics and then a student paramedic. So we had 6 medical professionals in our house. And we don't have a particularly big house. And we had a birth pool in there, right? So there wasn't much room. And I was like delirious, like happy, but like, you know, delirious and covered in blood. And like just in my dressing gown, they were like, you just need to walk out to the ambulance. And I remember being like, what are my neighbours going to think? Like, they just had me like howling, like mooing to the world. And now that I'm just like covered in blood. I think people say it's scary, but I didn't feel scared at all. Like I felt really content and just like, yeah, this is the best thing. This is nice. People are caring for me. Like I felt looked after. So it wasn't a bad thing. I went in the ambulance. So I remember finding it quite difficult. I couldn't hold him in the ambulance. I wasn't allowed to because where I was losing blood, he had to go in a car seat. And then my husband drove to hospital. He followed us up in the car.
And your baby stayed with you in the ambulance or went with your husband?
No, my baby stayed, yes. He stayed with me in the ambulance.
All right. You had to get to the hospital. And who helped with the repair? Was it your midwife or was it a hospital employee?
No, so then we went over to a sort of consultant, like an obstetrician.
Okay.
We then go over to them. So he or she, I think it was a he, but I think my husband said it was a she. I can't remember. But basically they came in and checked how bad the tear was. So I arrived in hospital, got put in a like private room. They came in and checked. But I remember them when they were checking, it really, really hurt. And I asked them to stop. And I was holding my son. I just finished. I was in the middle of my psychology masters at this point. So I was learning loads about brain development. I knew quite a lot about brain development anyway, about babies' brains and emotions and all sorts. And I remember having him in my arms and crying. And then he started crying. I remember saying to them, you're really hurting me. And now my baby's crying because you're hurting me. It's making me feel really emotional now. And he was okay, but I was so worried that I was making his like beginning hours not great for him. And I was in a lot of pain and they didn't stop. And that's quite hard to process. Like they should have listened to me and they didn't. And that's hard.
That's hard to hear.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. Take a moment. I can imagine that it's hard for you to share. And I want to thank you for sharing because I want women to hear what's going on and how our actions affect other people. So thank you for sharing.
That's okay. Thank you for listening to me and holding space for it.
When you asked for them to stop, they did not stop. They just continued and repaired you. And then that was that.
Yeah, so she finished her like investigation. She didn't stop. And then when she'd finished like checking, she obviously stopped. And then she said, okay, we need to go through to surgery. And they gave me a spinal block to do the surgery. And they were really lovely in the theatre. So like it did only get better from there. Like they were so lovely. I remember them telling me that I had beautiful hair and thinking like, how do I have beautiful hair? I must be like the sweatiest thing in the world. And they put music on and it was just a really happy place. And they were all really chill and really like, I felt really comfortable and really safe there. Like that was really lovely. And the anaesthetist, just everyone was that I kind of interacted with that was talking to me during the process was really, really lovely. And then they transferred me round to kind of a recovery room. Again, I was on my own. Joss was looking after the baby at this point, and then he came in with us after I had come out of surgery. And then my son was sick. He was sick a few times, and one of the maternity support assistants spotted his sick on a muzzy. It was like bright yellow, but I didn't really think anything of it because I didn't know, and he hadn't really opened his eyes much. And this is going to sound really naive, and like feel free to laugh at this point, but I just thought that they were like cats, like, because cats don't open their eyes when they're first born, and I just kind of thought like maybe his eyes will start to open more as he gets bigger. I don't know. So I hadn't really questioned it. Like, he acted fine, and like he had fed, he'd breastfed, so he was alert and awake enough to do that. So I hadn't really thought much of it. But anyway, this maternity, she took the muzzy and she took it to somebody else, and they said, "Oh, we think that's a sign of an infection, or that something might be going on inside his tummy."
Okay.
And I was like, right, okay. But obviously I'm knackered at this point. I haven't really slept. Like, my labour started 10 o'clock the day before. I hadn't slept. We're now like 8 p.m, 9 p.m. the following day. So I'm exhausted and miles away. And I was just like, okay. And then I remember, I think we must have been more like 2 a.m. by the time I'd come out of surgery. I remember my friend coming the next day, and I remember them saying to me, we need to, and Joss had gone home by this point, I think, to make sure the house was sorted out. And I remember them saying, he was there when they told us this, that they needed to take him downstairs or to a different hospital to check him.
Mm-hmm.
And we were at a hospital which has a really brilliant NICU ward, like a really, really brilliant neonatal care facility. And they took him in this, it looked like a pod, like a rocket ship pod.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a travel incubator, and they took him to the main hospital. So from our building to the main hospital in this travel incubator thing, and they put loads of tubes down his throat and had to check his tummy hadn't flipped. And I just remember being miles away.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on, but I just need him to be okay. I wasn't worried at any point that I don't know. I haven't really thought about it till now. This is a lot more emotional, I'm sorry, than I thought it would be. I feel like there's a lot more that I haven't really thought about than more to it. I think I was so proud of birthing such a gorgeous, beautiful, big baby. And we'd had such a brilliant birth. I was probably on a bit of a high from that. And I just watched them put these tubes down his throat, and it was awful. My friend was cuddling me and saying he'll be okay, they'll check him and he'll be fine, they'll make him better, he's in the best place. And they took him away, and I couldn't see him, and they just said to go back up to my room. They'd given me a private room, which was really lovely. I wasn't on a ward, and that was really kind of them. They were really, really lovely to me, and they said, just go back up and we'll let you know when he's back. And I remember, I don't know what time it was. It's a bit when you're, so overtired that you just feel like you're on another planet. I just didn't know really what was going on around me. And I remember showering, and then I showered, and I remember them coming up and saying, "Oh, you can come and get him now."
Mm-hmm.
But I was so, I don't know if I was in shock. I don't know where I was, but they came back 3 more times to say, "You can come and get him now." And then I think I'd let an hour go past after they'd first told me, because I just wasn't aware of the time and I was on my own. And I think then Joss came back and he was there with me. I can't really remember. And we went and got him, and his tummy hadn't flipped. He just had an infection, and he was going to be put on antibiotics for hopefully 3 days, but it ended up being 5. So we were kept in for 5 days with him being on antibiotics. So this little IV in his hand and this little splint on his arm to keep the IV in, so he didn't pull out, keep his arm straight. And we went with him every time he was given any antibiotics. There were lots of other babies that were having the same treatment as him, but we were the only parents that went every time he had his antibiotics given to him. I didn't leave him. No one could take him away from me. I didn't let anyone, after that time, I didn't let anyone take him or see him without me being with him. I was quite keen to keep close to him, but we saw it as a real gift being kept in hospital for those 5 days, because obviously we planned to be at home, but because we were at hospital, people could come and visit us, and they hadn't broken our space. They were coming in to see us in a different space, which was really nice. They kind of didn't break our bubble. We didn't have to host them, which I think is a lot of pressure that gets put on people after they've had babies. They fed me and kept me showered and clean and looked after me. So actually I was really well cared for after my stitches. I had time to heal. and to recover slowly. And they kept really close eyes on both of us. It meant Joss could go home and take our washing home and wash it, and he could rest too and recover, because obviously he hadn't really slept either. And he could eat properly and look after himself and get some space, which I think is so important. Like the men, if you are, or birth partners, whoever you have supporting you does so much to support you during your birth. And they don't get the hormones or the same maybe view from other people. They need time and space too to recover and to re-energize and be ready for what the next day holds with a newborn.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we were quite lucky really that we were in those 5 days.
I appreciate you saying you bring attention to birth partners resting and rehabilitating, especially if there's a little bit of trauma to the mom, because it's overwhelming. It's very overwhelming for them. It's somebody that they love and there's a new baby coming in. So I appreciate that you bring that up, that we also need to hold space for partners to recover also.
Yeah, I think it gets missed quite often that they are going through something big too.
Yeah, absolutely. So 5 days passed. Everything was good. Discharged home. How was going back home?
Yeah, it was exciting. We had this onesie that we'd bought, and we were so adamant he was going to be in it. And it was from this lovely shop, and it had these embroidered rainbow stars on it. It was beautiful. We put him in it, but honestly, it obviously didn't fit him. So he's all this scrunched up baby. He's squashed into this onesie, but it was we were we're getting him in it. And he wore it home, I think, and then obviously we took it off him. But it was so exciting to get home. It was just a breath of fresh air, going into our space with this little baby. We'd only been 2, and now we were 3 in our home, and we just cuddled on the sofa and sat, and we said no to visitors. We were quite clear, we don't want people over now. We just want to settle for at least a week, just the 3 of us, so we can really find our feet. I just remember he was so sick. I don't know if it was because of the tube stuff or whatever, but he was just sick, constantly, 30 times a day. He was just sick, but he was happy and he was growing, so no one was concerned. He wasn't poorly. He just threw up all his milk all the time. He was breastfed, but it didn't matter how much. That's the other thing, right? He was massive. Feeding a gigantic baby and holding a gigantic baby is quite hard work, breastfeeding wise. And he required a lot of milk. So yeah, he was fed a lot. I just remember all I did was feed him. I just felt like a cow.
After your son was born, did you all just decide to take some time before thinking about baby number 2? Or were you that was amazing, I want to go and do that again?
Yeah, I absolutely loved giving birth to him, but I absolutely loved being just a mummy of one. And I also found the adjustment to motherhood quite challenging. I loved him and I loved everything he brought to me, but I really struggled with the identity shift. I didn't realise that because I've been a nanny for years. I'd looked after hundreds of children and I've worked with kids my whole life, and everyone always said to me, which I don't think really helped, to be honest, but you'll be an amazing mum. And then when I had him, they were like, oh, you know what you're doing, you're going to be fine, you've got this. And I just felt this intense, huge pressure to be an incredible mum to him. And I didn't know where I fit in society anymore. There was a huge identity shift for me. It took me a long time to rediscover myself in motherhood and to understand who I was and how I showed up in the world when I had this small human I was now responsible for. But also he was full of life. He didn't stop. He started talking at 16 months and he just didn't stop. He was everything and anything. He wanted to be everywhere and all the places all of the time and understand everything that's going on in the world. So he took so much of our attention. And then we knew we wanted more babies. We've always wanted more babies. And we were I was a student midwife, so I was seeing babies obviously all the time at this point. So a few years had passed. I was loving, being involved in pregnancy and birth. And I just think it's a real privilege to be a part of someone's labour and delivery. I just think it's huge, and pregnancy, to be honest. And I think it's a real gift and a huge responsibility and a really nice place to be, and I loved it. And I saw all of these women giving birth and it just was I need to be pregnant again. This is beautiful. And Ozzy was asking for a baby. You know, he loves other kids. He'd have 15. We have 15 children if it was by him. He was desperate. So we just felt like the right time. He was going to start school. How old was he? So there's about 3-year age gap between them. So it was another year before he started school, but there was some time, he was bigger. We were out of COVID. It just felt like a good time.
You want to talk us through your second pregnancy? Was it pretty similar or was it a little different?
I think I definitely felt more sick in the first bit with my daughter. We got pregnant quite quickly again. And yeah, definitely felt quite sick in the first bit with her. I wasn't as big this time, but also because I had been like flagged in the system as having a big baby.
Okay.
So that made things a little more challenging. And I was a student midwife at the time, which was fortunate actually, because it meant I got to hear her heartbeat really early and whenever I wanted. Because I was at the hospital all the time. It was amazing. Like, I loved being pregnant with her. She was beautiful. She grew beautifully. It was comfortable. I was very lucky. I had a very positive experience. And I had all the standard aches and pains. I had a bit of pelvic girdle pain. I say my pregnancies were beautiful, and they were, because I got to grow a human, but that does sort of diminish the fact that it is exhausting and it is hard work and you are tired and you can't do much. But I just really allowed myself to lean into that. And gave myself space to be, more chilled and to not rush everywhere and to sit down because I needed to, but also to redecorate my house because that's what everyone seems to do when they're pregnant.
Did you opt for another home birth?
So I did with her, that was the plan, but I'd watched so many women get epidurals in hospital and just like have a relief across their faces I'd seen and have some really positive births from having an epidural. I'd seen some go not so positively, but I was happy with the idea. I had this really intense hip pain when I was at home, which I just couldn't shift. Ozzy remembers, my son, he remembers being collected by my mum about 5:30 in the morning. So I started labouring in the night this time, and it was much quicker. It was probably about 2 a.m. I started labouring. And I remember Joss went downstairs and he just cooked this massive bowl of pasta again. And he honestly must have cooked like 500 grams of pasta. And I ate like 4 mouthfuls of it. I remember I was in the lounge and Ozzy walked past me and he always says to me, "Oh, Mummy, you were sleeping on the sofa and you were going to giving birth to Panda." And it's lovely that he saw me and saw the calm. And then I had this hip pain. I couldn't shift it. And it was so painful. I knew from having Ozzy that it wasn't to do with my labour. Like, it wasn't a labour pain. It was painful, whereas I didn't find labour pain the same kind. I found it like achy, not pain.
Okay.
So then I remember phoning the hospital and saying, "Look, I remember being really confident, almost on the edge of too confident, and saying to Joss, call the labour line," because that's how it works here. You call the labour line, you say, "I'm in labour," and they say, "Oh, come on in." They ask you, what's going on, and they say, "Come on in." And I said to them, say to them that I'm not in labour, because I know I'm not in labour. I'm fine. I've just got this really uncomfortable hip pain, and I would like an epidural to help with the hip pain. And can I come in for that reason? And they said, "Yeah, come in, come see us, and we'll see where you're at, and we'll see what we can do to help." And I got in, and my mentor was there, Libby, who is an incredible midwife and woman. She's just a powerhouse. She's just incredible. She's so kind, so pro-women. She's everything you'd want to be in a midwife. And she was there, and she doesn't work in hospital. She's a community midwife, but she was doing a supernumerary shift in the hospital. So she happened to be there, and she was free. She had set my room up because she knew I wanted a home birth. So she had set the room up with like twinkly lights and like the projector on and like lovely music and like made it all dark. And she just cuddled me so tight. And I remember cuddling her and just crying and being like, "Oh my God, I'm so happy you're here," and being so happy to see her. And she got me into the room and she just asked, I said, "I've got this pain. I just can't get rid of it." She said, "Okay, where is it?" And I showed her and she said, "Okay, put your foot up on this stool and then just let your next contraction happen. We'll see what happens." And it went like, obviously her head was pressing something funny or whatever, but it went, like she moved and it went in the next contraction. So the hip pain had gone, but because I'd got it in my head that I was going to have an epidural, I was still like, "Right, Libby, get me an epidural. Like, I'm having it. I've made that decision now. It's happening." She was like, "Fine, I just need to like check how far along you are first, really, because we need to know that if we're going to give you an epidural." And I was like, "Okay." But I hadn't had any one check so far, and I was quite adamant I wasn't going to. But Libby, I really trusted. So I was like, "Fine, okay, check." And she did. And then she said, I'm going to go and get them. And then she did. And I don't know if this is okay to share with like the public world. She did the typical midwife thing where she was just like, I'm going to get them. I'm definitely going to get them, going to go get them now. And he was busy, to be fair, the anaesthetist, to do the epidural. But I think I just wasn't a priority because she told me afterwards I was already 8.5 centimetres. So I wasn't getting an epidural. But she obviously needed to please me and not let me shout at her and be like, why is it not happening? So she just kept being like, they're coming. They're going to be there soon.
I love it.
And I literally gave birth to her. Like, what we got there at like maybe 8:30, and I gave birth to her by 10 o'clock.
Okay.
You know, she was coming. It was beautiful. My delivery with her was beautiful. I was on all fours on the bed. I caught her myself. No one touched me. And I delivered her. I just brought her off my chest and rolled over and cuddled her, and it was wonderful.
That's so beautiful. That's amazing.
Yeah. It was really, really lovely. I think the fortunate thing was, because I was a student midwife, I could really be really clear with what I wanted. And I think that's the one thing I'd say to women is get your confidence, be really clear with what your body's telling you and what you want, because they were conscious of her heartbeat, as they always are when you're moving around a lot and it's harder to read. But I knew in my body she was coming, and I knew confidently that I was going to give birth to her and she was going to be okay. They did try to put a IV in, I think, because I'd said about the epidural and they need to put one in for your epidural in my wrist, but I was so sweaty. It was like 30 degrees in this room. And it just kept coming out because I was really sweaty. And I remember them saying, I just said to them, just leave it because she's coming out. So just leave it because I'm going to be fine. And then they did. But I think if I didn't have the confidence in that space, I would have let them carry on. And I think that could have disrupted the flow.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was beautiful. I did it 100 times over. It felt amazing. And I think to lots of people that's going to sound crazy, but it was incredible. The whole experience, it was beautiful, and she was delicious and wonderful.
How about bleeding? Did you have any bleeding or tearing because of your first?
Yeah, so I did tear again, and because of my first experience of them looking to check, I was really adamant they weren't going to look to check how bad the tear was. I said to them, you can check, but I need to have a spinal for you to check because it was too traumatic last time. And again, I really held on to that. And they said, well, we don't know if we're going to have space, and, it might not work out, and we can't just give you an epidural. And I said, well, you're not checking otherwise. I was very, I did have to really put my foot down, and I let Libby have a brief look. I just really didn't want that experience that I had last time. And they took me into theatre and they did stitch me up. They probably didn't need to have done it in theatre, but because I had my past experiences, they were very kind and they did accommodate me, which I was very fortunate for. Which probably meant my recovery was a little bit longer because obviously I'd had the spinal, but actually I enjoyed the lay down.
You did have a spinal for the recovery for your second?
Yeah, I did, but only because I'd had my previous experience, not because I really needed it. I think it was only a 2nd degree tear, so it could have been done by the midwife. I'm very grateful they did, and I hope talking about it means that more people feel confident to say and to put their foot down and say and make it clear what they need in that moment, and to express how they're feeling and if they feel safe or unsafe, and make that clear.
How long were you in the hospital for recovery before you went home?
I just had to wait till my legs came back, really. I think we were, I don't know, I think we were in till 11, 12 o'clock midnight that night. So we were in, because I remember ordering takeaway to the hospital. I remember being transferred around to the ward and then ordering takeaway, and we had Wagamamas, which was great because we love Wagamamas. And my husband and I being, just sitting and eating Wagamamas, and then we got discharged, I think, about midnight that night. The midwives were quite keen to get me home because I was fine, I was, recovering well and up and okay. And Ozzy was staying at my parents, so he was all right, he was sorted, and it was nice to be in a little bubble and just have the three of us come home and tuck up into bed when we got home.
Curious as to what is Wagamamas?
Wagamamas. It's a noodle restaurant. It's they do noodles and curries and stuff, and I love their noodle dishes. They did a really good pad thai.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how was little Ozzy meeting his baby sister?
He came to the hospital to meet her actually when I was still in the labour ward, so when I was still recovering, my legs were a bit dead still. And he came in, and we've got a video of him coming in and seeing her. And he just actually, I was eating chocolate cookies at the time. And he came in and he looked at her and he was so happy to see her. And then he looked at my cookies and he was like, "Can I have a cookie?" I was like, "Is that what you're excited about?" And then he had a cookie and he was so excited about having this cookie. But he was so happy to see her, and he loved her. Like we'd done a lot of preparation with him having a baby sister, and he was excited to have her. And I think he was surprised she didn't play enough. But he was 3, so that's pretty normal, isn't it? But yeah, he was happy to be there. And then he must have come home the next day. But to be honest with you, I don't remember much after that.
Yeah, those first days, those 6 weeks postpartum right after a baby is such a blur. Looking back on your 2 births and your labors, what are you most proud of?
My body, my voice, my power, my babies, the fact that they are strong, beautiful little things that are in the world, the fact that my body could do it and that my body made them was incredible. My husband was an incredible support. He just was an absolute rock. He advocated for me. He heard me. He gave me space. He cared for me. He put me on a pedestal. He made me feel like a princess, and he did everything he could to help look after our little creatures. But yeah, my voice, the fact that I could understand what I needed and make myself heard. Yeah, I think it's an incredible thing that women do. I think any woman that's, not just any woman that's given birth, but any woman that's held a child, for a long time and they're their child, whether you've adopted or not, being a mother is an incredible, amazing feat. And I think it's inspiring all women that give birth, and however which way they do it, however which way that child enters their life, I think it's incredible.
Well, Katy, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and open up with us and be vulnerable and to share your story so that together we can heal, grow, and learn. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to me and having me.
Hey there, amazing listeners. If you love what we do and want to see our podcast grow, we need your help. By making a donation, you'll be supporting us and bringing you even more great content. I truly believe creating this space for women all across the globe to share their story will allow us to collectively heal, grow, and become more empowered in the space that we deserve to be. Motherhood, womanhood, and however that looks and feels for each and every one of us. Every contribution, big or small, will make a huge difference. If you can, head over to support us today. There's a link in the bio to support the podcast. Every contribution, big or small, will make a huge difference. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being a part of this journey. Thank you for listening. Be sure to check out our social media. All links are provided in the episode description. Please give us a follow. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, reach out to us via email at info@maternalwealth.com. And remember, stay healthy, embrace your power, and you got this.